You ever realize too late that the only reason a fire didn't burn you alive was because you kept pouring water on it? Yeah. That was me. I spent years holding up a family that never once tried to hold me back. I don't mean hold me back like sabotage. I mean literally, they never reached out when I fell. Never offered a hand when I broke. Just watched, nodded, and called it tough love. My name's Ethan. I'm 37. Husband to Natalie, or as her family liked to say behind closed doors, the responsible one. A financial advisor, no kids, no drama, unless you count the walking inferno that was her family. When I first met them, I thought they were just a little eccentric. Loud, opinionated, boundary-challenged. I grew up in a quiet Midwest home. You keep your voice down and your promises up. So, her family's chaos felt theatrical, harmless even. I was wrong. It wasn't chaos. It was calculation in disguise. Natalie had been holding that circus together with nothing but duct tape, spreadsheets, and sheer willpower. I used to think she did it out of love. Later, I realized it was guilt. That's what they trained into her since childhood. If she didn't sacrifice herself, she wasn't loyal. If she didn't bankroll someone's bad decision, she was selfish. If she dared ask for anything in return, she was acting superior. And for a while, I played along. I watched her write $3,000 checks every month to her little sister Adriana and her charming leech of a husband Marcus, both of whom treated ambition like it was a costume you could throw on at brunch and take off by dinner. We called it temporary help. They called it family support. But after the 6th temporary check, I asked Natalie one question. What are we investing in here? A startup or an addiction to failure? She didn't answer. Not because she didn't have one, but because she already knew I was right. She always knew. But hope is a hell of a drug. And when it's laced with family guilt, it's almost impossible to quit. So yeah, I watched. I waited. I stayed quiet. Until the day her sister asked for $100,000. Because that was the day everything started unraveling. It came wrapped in compliments and fake vulnerability, Adriana's favorite kind of sales pitch. We were at some overpriced tapas place she insisted on meeting at. Natalie had ordered water. Adriana ordered champagne. I should have known right then what was coming. I've been thinking about starting my own agency, Adriana said, swirling her glass like she was the CFO of something real. Digital marketing. I already have the name picked out, Ether Strategies. Doesn't it just sound expensive? She smiled, all teeth. Natalie smiled back, tight and cautious. Sounds ambitious, I said, doing my best not to roll my eyes. It's time I built something of my own, Adriana continued, laying it on like this was some TED Talk and not a prelude to a family mugging. But I'll need investors, someone who believes in me, who sees the bigger picture. She paused like it was supposed to land dramatically. Then, I'm asking for $100,000. Now, if you've never watched a woman who's been emotionally conditioned to keep saving people slowly dissociate over paella, you missed a show that night. Natalie didn't answer at first. She just stared down at her napkin. Not in shock. Not even in anger. Just the numb quiet that comes when someone's been preparing for disappointment, but still hoping they're wrong. You'd be a partner, Adriana added quickly. 25% equity. Contracts, financial reports, the whole thing. Totally above board. That part, the totally above board, that's what caught my attention. When people insist something's honest before you even ask. It's never honest. I looked at Natalie, waiting. She nodded. 75, she said quietly. I'll invest 75,000, but I want it in writing. Contracts, reporting, monthly statements. Adriana's face didn't falter. Too polished. She just reached over the table and grabbed Natalie's hand like it was a Bible oath. You won't regret this, she said. I swear. Spoiler alert, we regretted it. We signed everything, or I should say Natalie did. I reviewed the contracts, of course. I'm not stupid, but paperwork only matters when the other party plays by the rules. And Adriana? She wasn't even in the same stadium. Months went by. No reports. No updates. Just Instagram stories of poolside cocktails, branded handbags, and business retreats that looked suspiciously like beach vacations. Always networking, always tagging locations that screamed luxury. I mentioned it once, casually. "Is this what your marketing agency does?" I asked over dinner, showing Natalie one of Adriana's posts. She looked at the phone for a long moment, then pushed her plate away. "I think I need to make a few calls." That was the moment her hope started cracking. And what we didn't know then, not yet, was that the hole was already much deeper than just a missing report. It wasn't a business. It was a heist. And Natalie was the vault. The first real warning didn't come with a phone call or a confession. It came with a credit alert. Natalie had set it up years ago, one of those quiet precautions she never talked about but always kept running. Her work taught her that danger doesn't knock, it pries windows open while you're out back mowing the lawn. We were sitting on the couch one Saturday morning. I was halfway through my coffee when she froze mid-scroll. "They're running inquiries in my name," she said flatly. I leaned over. "Chase. American Express. One I didn't recognize, something obscure and high-end. All in the last 10 days. She hadn't applied for any of them. At first, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe someone entered the wrong social security number. But then came the second hit. Adriana's Instagram. Now, to understand the full absurdity of what we saw, you have to remember this was the same woman who, not 3 weeks earlier, cried over the phone because she couldn't afford payroll for her supposed agency. And here she was poolside in Tulum. A champagne bottle the size of her self-delusion in one hand, tagging some wellness entrepreneur and captioning it, "Manifestation isn't magic, it's mindset." Natalie stared at the screen like it might blink and change. It didn't. Then came another post. A shopping spree on Rodeo Drive. Another. A private yoga retreat. Always with hashtags like #grind, #bossenergy, #blessed. No mention of her employees. No client shoutouts. No case studies. Just filters, flash, and luxury paid for, apparently, by investors. Natalie didn't say much that day. She just opened her laptop and started pulling records, copies of the agreement, wire confirmations, emails. She printed everything and slid it into a manila folder. Then she opened a new tab and typed in a name I hadn't seen since our first tax filing together. Benjamin Hayes. Her lawyer. One she'd used before, quietly when settling a client dispute. Not flashy, not loud. Just effective. She called him. "Ben, it's Natalie. I need help and I need discretion." That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was war. And Natalie? She just decided to stop playing nice. Benjamin didn't ask for drama. He asked for documents. Within 3 days, Natalie had emailed him a zip file with every receipt, email thread, transfer confirmation, and contract. The man didn't even flinch. Just said, "I'll bring in someone I trust." Discreet. Surgical. Enter a financial investigator named Merrill. Gray suit. No small talk. The kind of guy who probably calculates tip percentages in his sleep and could spot a forged signature through a car windshield. He started digging. What came back? Devastating. It wasn't just one credit card. It wasn't just one loan. It was everything. Adriana had used Natalie's information to apply for lines of credit under the business, forging signatures so well it would have passed most casual scrutiny. She'd fabricated invoices. Created shell entities. Money was being funneled through dummy corporations with names like Nova Bloom Collective and Elem Strategies LLC. Sounded fancy. Reality? They were P.O. boxes and prepaid phones. And the expenses? Outrageous. $300,000 in total. That's what Merrill said, flipping through pages like a death sentence read aloud. High-end retail, 5-star hotels, spa retreats, private chefs, wire transfers to Adriana's personal account, even one to her husband Marcus listed under consulting. That man hadn't consulted on anything in his life unless it involved wine pairings or luxury watch straps. But here's where it turned dark. Some of that money had gone to Natalie's parents. Quiet, undocumented transfers marked as medical reimbursement and estate maintenance. They didn't have an estate. They had a 3-bedroom colonial with peeling shutters and a golf cart they used ironically. Natalie didn't speak for a while after hearing it. She just sat on the edge of the bed with the folder in her lap. Like she was holding the autopsy of a relationship she'd spent her whole life trying to resuscitate. This wasn't just Adriana, she finally said. They all knew. And that's when the grief started turning into something else. Not rage. Not revenge. Something colder. Sharper. Strategy. She wasn't going to scream. She wasn't going to beg. She was going to finish what they started by ending it completely. Thanksgiving. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. After 6 months of radio silence, gaslighting, and passive-aggressive text messages from her mother that read like badly disguised scripture quotes, Natalie got the invitation. A family Thanksgiving dinner. Casual. Just like old times. Sure. And wolves send invitations before they bite. I didn't like it. Said so too. But Natalie just smiled, the kind of smile you only earn after burying your last ounce of hope. They want closure, she said. Let's give it to them. What she didn't mention was the stack of documents she packed into her briefcase. She'd color-coded them: transfers, forged authorizations, shell corporations, text logs. And right on top, a notarized legal notice prepared by Benjamin Hayes himself. The dinner was at her parents' house. White lights on the porch. Smell of cloves and something burnt in the oven. Adriana answered the door like she hadn't stolen 6 figures and committed a Class C felony. Natalie, she squealed, pulling her into a tight hug. You look amazing. Funny how people suddenly respect you when they sense you're no longer playing defense. I trailed behind, watching the show. Marcus greeted us with a raised glass and a fake British accent he'd apparently developed since the last time we saw him. Her parents were all warm grins and we missed yous like they hadn't been caught red-handed siphoning money. And then came dinner. We sat around the table like a Norman Rockwell painting with a ticking time bomb under it. Turkey. Cranberries. Forced laughter. Then Adriana stood, champagne flute in hand. I'd like to make a toast, she said sweetly. To family. And knowing who really stands by you. Not everyone does, of course. Her eyes flicked toward Natalie. But that's okay. Because sometimes you have to let go of people who don't value the spirit of family. Even if they're related by blood. Ah, there it was. The expulsion. Wrapped in a toast. Delivered with poison and pearls. The table went quiet. All eyes on Natalie. And that's when she reached down and placed the dossier on the table. Funny, she said, flipping it open, because I brought something too. Silence. The sound of a blade being drawn, and no one at the table even knew they'd already been cut. The sound of papers sliding across fine linen is sharper than you'd think. Especially when everyone at the table knows exactly what they don't want to see. Natalie didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. That's the thing about truth, it's not loud. It just sits there. Heavy. Undeniable. This, she said calmly, tapping the folder, is a full breakdown of every transfer made from my accounts. Every credit application. Every forged signature. Every wire to a company that doesn't exist. Her father blinked like someone had just flipped the lights on. Her mother's fork hovered midair like she forgot how eating worked. Marcus leaned back slightly, trying to calculate how fast he could disappear without looking guilty. Spoiler, too late? Adriana? Adriana laughed. That brittle, high-pitched laugh that only comes from people who know they're drowning but still want to pretend they're swimming. This is ridiculous, she scoffed. You're going to accuse me of, what? Fraud? Because your precious little business investments didn't work out. Natalie didn't even blink. Just reached in and laid down a single page. A wire transfer log. From Adriana's agency account to a debit card in Marcus's name. Category, petty cash reimbursement. Amount, $11,412. On the same day, he posted a photo in front of a rented Lamborghini in Vegas. Adriana's face froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. Her mother started crying, loud, performative sobs, the kind meant to change the subject and rewrite the narrative. How could you do this to us? She whimpered. On Thanksgiving? This is a family gathering, Natalie. Natalie looked at her, stone-faced. You mean like when your other daughter stole $300,000 and you helped hide it? Boom. Her father stood, puffing up like a deflated balloon, trying to reassert dominance. You don't talk to your mother that way. I won't allow it. She slid another document across the table. Transfer logs. To his account. From the shell company. Labeled, landscaping consulting. He hadn't touched a lawnmower since 1983. You all knew, she said. Quiet. Controlled. Like a woman who's finally tired of watching people light matches in her name. You all used me. Lied to me. And when I started asking questions, you turned it around and called me disloyal. Adriana tried one last time. This is just a misunderstanding. No, Natalie cut in. It's over. Then she pulled out the last item from her briefcase. The ultimatum. Signed and notarized. One option, pay back every cent, sign a legal no-contact agreement. Or, she looked at her parents. At Adriana. At Marcus. Or I press charges. That silence? That was the sound of a kingdom crumbling. One built on guilt. Burned down by evidence. You ever watch a family try to lawyer themselves out of a mess with zero legal training and a buffet of bad instincts? It's a thing of tragic beauty. Her dad went first, tried the patriarch move. Puff out the chest, talk about misunderstandings, quote something vaguely biblical like that would make the fraud vanish. This is still your family, he said, as if DNA somehow canceled out financial crime. Natalie didn't flinch. So's the IRS, she replied. And I'm guessing they'd be interested in those shell transfers labeled estate management. Her mother switched tactics, tears, guilt, appeals to her heart. You're tearing us apart. No, Natalie said, steady as stone. You did that. I'm just not taping it back together this time. Marcus stood up, mumbling something about needing a lawyer. Smartest thing he's ever said. But Adriana wasn't done yet. She had one more card to play, and it was her classic. I was struggling, Natalie. You knew that. I was trying to build something. I didn't think you'd notice. That last line almost did it. Almost. Because for a second I saw Natalie blink just once and I knew what she was remembering. The years of therapy bills she covered. The rent she paid just until they got on their feet. The time Adriana borrowed her car for an emergency and returned it with a parking ticket and a designer bag in the back seat. Natalie nodded once. You're right, she said. I did notice. Just not soon enough. Then she slid the ultimatum forward. One choice. 24 hours. They all looked at it like it was written in another language. Benjamin, her lawyer, had drafted it to perfection, full restitution agreement, no contact clause, an automatic trigger to criminal prosecution if even one payment was missed. Ironclad. It was, in effect, a mercy. Natalie could have gone nuclear. Instead, she offered them dignity. They didn't thank her. They just sat there. Ashen. Silent. The entire dinner table, once a battlefield of guilt, manipulation, and fake affection, now just collateral damage. And we left. No screaming. No hugging. No hugs goodbye. Just chairs creaking as we stood and the cold click of the dossier closing behind her. By the time we reached the car, Natalie finally exhaled. You okay? I asked. She looked at me, eyes clear, voice steady. I'm done. And for the first time in years, she meant it. They signed. Of course they did. The next morning, Benjamin called to confirm it, her parents, Adriana, Marcus. Every single one of them signed that agreement like it was the last parachute on a crashing plane. Which, in a way, it was. Adriana's signature was the sloppiest. Probably shaking. Or maybe drunk. Marcus initialed the wrong page twice. Her mother signed in purple gel ink like it was a sympathy card. Her father? Printed his name like he was filling out a raffle slip. None of it mattered. The ink was dry. Benjamin filed the agreement. Escrow was opened for repayment. First installment scheduled within 30 days. Natalie didn't smile. Didn't celebrate. She just sat at the kitchen table staring out the window, coffee going cold in her hand. What now? I asked. She looked at me. And I swear it was the first time in years she looked like herself, not the caretaker, not the family safety net, not the human apology for other people's dysfunction. Now she said they pay. And then they disappear. Her parents ended up liquidating one of their properties to cover their portion. The summer house. Funny, Natalie used to mow that lawn every year while her dad barked about hedges. Adriana refinanced the house she bought with Natalie's help. The one with the marble kitchen and the imported wine fridge. Sold the luxury SUV, too. We saw the listing online. Stripped down like a showroom demo. First payment hit her account on the 28th. Exactly $102,483.72. Benjamin made sure it included interest. There was no apology. No explanation. Just silence, the kind that follows a detonation. Natalie blocked their numbers. Deleted their emails. She didn't gloat. Didn't monologue. Just let it all go. I thought it would feel like revenge, she told me one night. But it doesn't. What does it feel like? I asked. She thought for a moment. Like surgery. Messy. Painful. But necessary. And I realized then this wasn't just about money. It never was. This was about finally drawing a line no one could cross without consequences. A boundary written in ink and backed by law. People think once the bad guys get exposed, the story ends. But truth is, the fallout's the real plot. The calls stopped. The letters, the guilt-laced voicemails, even the concerned messages from second cousins trying to stay in the loop, all of it vanished. Like a bad dream the family agreed not to talk about. And Natalie? She didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. She crashed. Not in some dramatic movie way, no sobbing on the bathroom floor or throwing things. She just slowed down, went quiet, slept 12 hours a night and still looked tired. You didn't just lose your money, I told her once. You lost your narrative. The story you've been telling yourself since you were a kid. That they'd change. That if she just gave more, tried harder, smiled bigger, they'd love her the way she loved them. But that story? It died the moment they sold her trust like a spare tire. So she did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She started therapy. Twice a week. No skipped sessions. She told me later it felt like learning a new language, one where saying no didn't mean betrayal and letting go wasn't abandonment. Where silence was power, not punishment. Then she called Vanessa. The cousin who always watched from the sidelines. The one who saw everything and said nothing until now. Vanessa invited her for coffee. They met at a quiet spot downtown and Natalie came back hours later with a strange look on her face. What happened? I asked. She apologized, Natalie said. Said she knew. Said she should have spoken up. That she was scared to be next. And just like that, a bridge that had been underwater for years slowly started to resurface. They started talking. Then meeting regularly. Nothing dramatic, no tearful reunions. Just slow, consistent presence. Real connection. No manipulation. No emotional invoices. Meanwhile, at work, Natalie started turning into something else entirely. Sharper. More focused. Clients started asking questions like, how did you catch that? Or how did you know they were hiding assets? Because she did know. Personal betrayal had made her fluent in financial abuse and now she was helping others spot it too. Quietly, professionally. One client at a time. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. And for the first time in years, Natalie didn't feel like she was rebuilding. She felt like she was finally building for herself. There was no grand finale. No courtroom standoff. No family member racing through the rain to beg forgiveness at our doorstep. Just peace. The kind that doesn't make a sound but changes the air in a room. By the third repayment, Natalie stopped checking the deposits. Benjamin handled it. The money was coming in like clockwork. But her attention had shifted. She started volunteering part-time with a nonprofit that offered financial literacy for domestic abuse survivors. People who'd been drained not just of their accounts, but their confidence, their dignity, their voices. They didn't need a pep talk. They needed a blueprint. Natalie gave them that. She knew all the tricks, the hidden debt, the forged documents, the way gaslighting wraps itself in kindness. She taught them what normal doesn't look like, how manipulation can wear a smile, and how to build a paper trail that makes a judge take you seriously. She wasn't doing it to feel noble. She was doing it because she wished someone had done it for her. Meanwhile, at home, something had shifted between us two. Not in a dramatic way, we didn't reinvent marriage overnight. But there was this new honesty. We used to orbit around her family like it was some inevitable sun. Yeah? We had gravity of our own. No more splitting holidays out of guilt. No more RSVPing to obligation dinners with people who hadn't earned a chair at our table. And in place of the family she lost, a new one quietly emerged. Colleagues turned friends. Vanessa, surprisingly consistent. Two neighbors who helped her move a broken bookcase one afternoon and stuck around for wine. People who showed up not because of blood or legacy, but because they wanted to be there. Because that's the thing Natalie finally understood. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when everything collapses and stays when you've rebuilt something stronger. It showed up on a Tuesday. No note. No apology. Just a wire transfer confirmation from Benjamin. Final payment received. Account settled. Natalie stared at it for a second, then closed her laptop without a word. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. Just exhaled. Like she'd been holding something in for so long she forgot what it felt like to breathe freely. I poured us 2 glasses of wine that night, nothing fancy, just decent red and a quiet moment. We clinked glasses, not in celebration, but in confirmation. It's over, I said. Natalie shook her head. No, she corrected. They're over. I'm just getting started. We didn't talk about them after that. Not the signatures. Not the silence. Not the desperate voicemails they left before going dark for good. They'd made their choice, and so had she. A few days later, Natalie filed paperwork to officially change her emergency contact. Removed her mother. Added Vanessa. It was symbolic. But not just symbolic. It meant she no longer expected the people who broke her to show up when things got hard. She'd chosen someone who actually would. That night, she opened a drawer in her home office and pulled out the original manila folder, the one with all the evidence. I think I'm done carrying this, she said. We shredded it. Every page. Every spreadsheet. Every lie repackaged as obligation. Gone in minutes. The past didn't deserve a file cabinet. It didn't even deserve space in the recycle bin. And when we were done, Natalie looked lighter. Not victorious. Not triumphant. Just free. 1 year later, almost to the day, she threw her own Thanksgiving. Same date. Same hour. Very different table. No turkey. Natalie hated turkey but always ate it growing up because that's just what we do. Not this time. This time it was grilled salmon, sweet potatoes, and lemon cake from that tiny bakery down the street she'd always loved but never suggested because her mother had a system. We invited the people who'd been there when it actually mattered. Vanessa brought wine and made a toast. She didn't say much, just enough. A quiet apology wrapped in sincerity and no expectation of being let off the hook. 2 of Natalie's co-workers showed up with homemade bread and a playlist that didn't include a single overplayed carol. One of my cousins came, too, the kind who sends check-in texts and remembers birthdays without needing Facebook to prompt him. Nobody argued. Nobody faked anything. And when Natalie stood up to say a few words, it wasn't rehearsed. I used to think family meant loyalty no matter what, she said, her voice steady. Now I know better. Loyalty without respect is just quiet self-destruction. A pause. This year, I didn't lose my family. I found it. There were no standing ovations. Just nods. Glasses raised. Real acknowledgement. And for the first time in her life, Natalie wasn't the one saving the room. She was simply part of it. Not the emotional ATM. Not the scapegoat. Just herself in a room full of people who liked her that way. The weirdest part about healing? How unfamiliar it feels. Natalie spent so long in survival mode that stillness felt dangerous. Like if nothing was on fire, it just meant you weren't paying attention. So when life finally slowed down, she didn't know what to do with it. She took long walks. Bought fresh flowers just because. Canceled a subscription she didn't need and didn't feel guilty about it. Started baking, then stopped baking. It wasn't about the hobby. It was about the freedom to quit without shame. Her therapist once told her, sometimes peace feels boring because chaos was your rhythm. She wrote that down. I found it later on a sticky note in her desk drawer. Meanwhile, her work life flourished. Clients trusted her. Not because she sold them something, but because she understood them. She started spotting red flags in other people's finances that they didn't even know were red flags. It's weird, she told me one night, legs tucked under her on the couch. I used to think I was just good with numbers. Now I realize I'm good at spotting lies people tell themselves. She meant it compassionately, not as judgment, but as truth. The kind that comes from surviving your own. Vanessa stayed close. No fanfare, no dramatic sisterhood arcs. Just steady check-ins, shared meals, actual presence. And every once in a while, Natalie would see something, an old family photo, a familiar handwriting style on junk mail, and she'd go quiet for a beat. Not broken. Just remembering who she used to be and grateful she wasn't anymore. We never talked much about the money after it finished paying out. It wasn't the point. It was just the receipt for a transaction they thought they'd get away with. But Natalie? She kept the interest. Every hard-earned ounce of it. You want to know the truth? Natalie never wanted revenge. Not really. She wanted acknowledgement. A sign that her loyalty meant something. That if she kept showing up, they might eventually meet her halfway. Instead, they met her at the edge of a cliff and asked her to jump first. So no, she didn't torch the family tree. She just stopped watering dead roots. After that final Thanksgiving she hosted, the quiet got deeper. And cleaner. No more cryptic birthday texts from her mother pretending everything was fine. No more relatives reaching out with concerns that were really just probes for gossip. No more drive-by guilt trips dressed up as invitations. They were gone. Blocked. Muted. Forgotten, at least, officially. But sometimes we'd drive past a neighborhood that looked like her parents'. Or hear a name that rhymed with Adriana's. And I'd see it, that flicker behind Natalie's eyes. Grief, maybe? But not for them. For the version of herself that kept trying to belong where she was only ever tolerated. I spent 30 years being the good daughter, she told me one night. Turns out that role came with no pension. She wasn't bitter when she said it. She was clear. And clarity, as she learned, is more powerful than anger. Because anger wants a fight. Clarity just walks away and locks the door behind it. That year, she started writing. Nothing grand. Just essays, reflections, a few pieces for financial advocacy blogs. One post about identifying signs of economic manipulation in families went viral. A podcast reached out. Then a nonprofit. Then a publisher. Suddenly, the story she tried to hide had become something people needed to hear. And she didn't tell it for sympathy. She told it for anyone still stuck in a living room full of false smiles, wondering why love always felt like debt. The second Thanksgiving after everything? Different. Not quieter, just cleaner. No subtext at the table. No one trying to weaponize a toast. No anxiety pretending to be politeness. Just real people. Real laughter. Real food Natalie actually liked. She hosted again, same house, same long table, same string lights out back. But this time she added something. A tradition. One by one, each guest was handed a folded piece of paper and a pen. Write down something you let go of this year, she said. Then we'll burn them. No speeches. No oversharing. Just honesty folded twice. I watched as Vanessa scribbled something quickly. A colleague of Natalie's hesitated, then wrote slowly. Natalie? She stared at her blank page for a good minute before her pen even moved. Later, out back by the fire pit, she dropped hers and last. No one asked what she wrote, but I saw the way her shoulders relaxed after it turned to ash. I didn't need to read it. I already knew. Because letting go wasn't just something she did once in court. It was something she kept doing. Every day. She let go of the need to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding her. Let go of the myth that biology equaled loyalty. Let go of the guilt that came every time she chose peace over performance. And in its place? Boundaries. Friendship. A life that didn't drain her to maintain. We stayed out by the fire for hours, just talking. At one point, someone asked, "Do you miss them?" Natalie didn't hesitate. "No," she said. "I miss who I thought they could be. But I don't miss who they were." That's the thing about surviving betrayal. You don't rebuild to prove anything. You rebuild so you never forget what you're worth.